I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, let's talk about Jeremy Corbyn, Labour leader, who has now been called too frail to be prime minister. This was by senior members of the UK civil service. Very odd stuff going on in the UK, Alexander. Why would the civil service come out with such an assessment to call him too frail to be prime minister?
Well, first of all, it is extremely odd in the sense of it being almost unprecedented. I mean, the British civil service is supposed to be completely apolitical. Civil servants are the servants of ministers. They are not supposed to have political opinions as far as civil servants, distinct from those of ministers, and they're not supposed to involve themselves directly in any way in the political process. And of course, by coming along to a national newspaper and talking in this fashion and interfering in the question of who the Labour Party leader should be, they are actually interfering in the political process in a way that violates the civil service's tradition of neutrality. However, we live in interesting times, as they say, and we've seen things happen in the United States over the course of the Russiagate scandal, which I once would have thought was inconceivable, that, members of the deep state in the United States would openly conspire against the person who was the elected president of the United States. And as I have often said on our programs, and as we've often discussed on our programs, there is a deep state in Britain too. And Jeremy Corbyn, very much like Donald Trump in the United States, is its target, even and despite the fact that Corbyn and Trump are ideological opposites and almost certainly wouldn't like each other. And even though Corbyn has said some absolutely terrible things about Donald Trump. Now, why did it happen? I think there are a number of answers to that question. Firstly, it is no secret that the British establishment, of which, to be clear, the civil service is a part of, doesn't like Jeremy Corbyn because it sees him as a radical socialist who will make changes to Britain's economy and Britain's society that they don't like. I mean, he's known to be someone who has a history, for example, of wanting to expand public ownership of British utilities and British industries, of embracing industrial planning, of increasing welfare spending, of increasing taxes on wealthier people, things which, as I said, predictably, a very conservative establishment doesn't terribly like. But I think there is a deeper reason here, and that is this. I think that over and above Jeremy Corbyn's domestic policies, it is his foreign policies that they don't like. They don't like his opposition to the various regime change wars. They are unhappy with the way in which he's criticizing the current policies, for example, that Britain is following in Syria, in the Persian Gulf, in Venezuela. And they do not like at all the fact that as leader of the Labour Party, he is resisting the enormous pressure coming from within the Labour Party, pushed by its Blairite establishment, for Labour to commit itself to a second referendum in which Labour would campaign to remain in the European Union. Jeremy Corbyn has resisted this pressure. He's come in for tremendous criticism because of it. There have been repeated stories circulating that he's about to back down and agree to make that commitment. He never quite does. And I strongly suspect that these two civil servants who've spoken to the Times newspaper in this fashion are expressing the frustration and anger of the very strongly pro-EU civil service at the way in which Jeremy Corbyn is resisting the pressure to overturn the Brexit referendum result of 2016.
Yeah, this sounds to me like it's a setup and a hit piece. That's for sure. And I think you're right. The EU definitely could be behind this.
Yeah.
I think Corbyn has also had taken a very controversial stance against Israel and what's going on in Palestine as well with the Palestinians. So I think he's made a lot of enemies there, powerful enemies there. So knives are out. Knives are out to get Corbyn, correct?
Absolutely, they are, to an extraordinary degree. I mean, I'll just say something very quickly about this. I mean, his policy, which has been consistent, incidentally, for as long as I can remember him in politics, and I remember him coming into politics, I think in 1983 was when he was first elected to Parliament. He has always been a very strong supporter of Palestinian rights. He has always been a very strong supporter critic of Israeli government policy in the West Bank and in Gaza. No one, until very recently, ever suggested that these were anti-Semitic positions for him to have. And yet we've been seeing in Britain a campaign brought against him by parts of the establishment, which have said that, if he is not exactly an anti-Semite, he is supposedly somehow sympathetic to anti-Semites by pursuing this policy. I take the view that this is very much part of the campaign that we've been discussing, this hit job, as you rightly said, against Corbyn. But I don't think it's Palestine or Israel that is their major concern about Corbyn. I think the EU issue is much more pressing. And I really think that at this moment in time, with Boris Johnson overwhelmingly likely to be the next British Conservative Prime Minister, committed publicly to getting Britain out of the EU on the 31st of October, if necessary, on a basis of a no-deal Brexit, the British establishment is pulling out all the stops to try to derail that. And the obstacle that's standing in their way is Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, let me read you Jeremy Corbyn's tweet in response to what the civil servant said. This is what Corbyn tweeted out. There must be a thorough and independent investigation into senior civil servants trying to undermine the next Labour government. The establishment, worried about our plans to redistribute wealth and power, is stepping up its attacks. Our movement stands together. Corbyn does not mention the EU here, does not mention Brexit. What do you make of his response on Twitter?
Well, this is one of the problems. I mean, he's had to be incredibly evasive about this. And notice
evasive or weak?
Well, I think both, actually. But I mean, in fairness to him, given that the Labour Parliamentary Party is overwhelmingly pro-EU and is doing everything it possibly can to remove him, given that the Labour Party a political machine is overwhelmingly pro-EU and is doing everything it can to remove him, and given that the Labour Party membership is also pro-EU, though it has tended to support him, Jeremy Corbyn has been in a very difficult political position. I think that a stronger, more confident leader would have been able to go out and make a clearer pitch and say and explain to the Labour Party that a Labour Party, a party that calls itself a Labour Party, cannot, if it presents itself as standing up for working class people, so obviously oppose a policy of leaving the EU, which working class people, including in its core heartland areas, have overwhelmingly supported. But, Jeremy Corbyn is not strong in that way. And despite that, I still think that he's shown a high degree of tenacity in withstanding that kind of pressure. But, you see this in his tweet. He talks about our movement stands united. Everyone knows that it doesn't. Everyone knows that in reality, most of the Labour establishment want to see him go. So he engages in this evasive language, this ambiguous language, to paper over the cracks, and at the same time, he's making the absolutely correct point that this is clearly an attempt by members of the British elite, the deep state here, to destabilise his leadership and to remove him and to prevent him from becoming Britain's Prime Minister.
Yeah, it's very similar to me. I mean, you mentioned the Trump, how the Trump situation with Corbyn is kind of, runs parallel, even though, they may not like each other and they come from two different, planets politically.
Yes.
But, you have Trump who went up against all the rhinos and the Republicans within his own party, who to this very day oppose just about everything he does.
Exactly.
Trump takes a much more aggressive and a much firmer stance when he's expressing himself. And Trump has a very good talent to go to the people. Yes. I mean, obviously, it's a different position where Trump is president and Corbyn is opposition. But still, Corbyn, my gut tells me that Corbyn could be a little more aggressive and a little more outspoken, a little more engaging with the Labour voters and the Labour populace.
I think he could be an awful lot more outspoken. I don't think just a little. I think he could be much, much more. I think that actually he holds a potential winning hand. I mean, that's my own analysis. I know a lot of people wouldn't agree, but I think if he made a very strong pitch and said quite straightforwardly, look, what is it you're fighting for? Why is the EU so important to you if you're a Labour supporter? What do you get from the EU? And are we really going to turn our back on the people in our, the working class people in our heartlands that our party was created to represent and to support? I think he would win over a lot of people, but he's far too intimidated by the people around him ever to do that. I think one of the fundamental differences between Jeremy Corbyn and Donald Trump is the issue of personal confidence. I know Donald Trump always gets called a narcissist, a megalomaniac, all those sort of things. And no doubt he is a very self-confident and exuberant man. Jeremy Corbyn is one of the kindest, I know that because I know people who know him, one of the kindest and nicest and gentlest people in British politics. Niceness and gentleness and kindness in politics just often doesn't cut it. One has to be absolutely truthful about that.
Yeah, that's an excellent assessment. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran, thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on that subscribe button, click on the notifications bell, click on the like button, and please share this channel, share these videos outside of YouTube, because YouTube makes it very, very certain that no one will discover this channel within YouTube. They don't show us on the suggested videos. They don't show us a lot of times on search. They've made it a point to not censor us, but to suppress us. Alexander, people need to share this channel on other platforms, via email, word of mouth, Minds, Gab. We are on BitChute.
Absolutely.
Twitter, Facebook, even though I don't like to say Facebook. I said Facebook. Anywhere you can share the channel.
I mean, we are expanding. We are growing. We're still growing strongly on all other platforms that we are involved in, except perhaps Facebook, which is the twin of YouTube in some ways. But in all of the others, we're growing and growing solidly and well. YouTube is holding us back to the extent that it can. And it's doing that to lots of other alternative sites, and we consider, if I have to say, that we are that is not only wrong, for all sorts of good reasons, because we see it as a violation of free speech, but we utterly reject any suggestion, that we're a conspiracy channel, that we peddle fake news. On the contrary, we are opponents of such things. We give clear, incisive, fact-based, objective commentary. You may not always agree with what we say. We have a right to say it. We don't engage in fanciful speculations, as you've just heard on this program. And yet, as I said, despite all of that, despite that we are a solidly grounded channel, YouTube is trying to slow our growth. In fact, it is slowing our growth. It's brought us to an almost complete stop.
Well, we're non-interventionists. We believe in not having all these senseless wars. We believe in realpolitik. We believe in countries' sovereign rights. And we're very complimentary towards many countries that, the establishment at YouTube, like Russia. We'll talk good things about Russia as to what they're doing good, or Iran or China. We'll try to present the whole story. Many times as you promote the mugs, the East and the West, we'll try to give people a clear picture as to what's going on. And the overlords in Silicon Valley obviously do not like that.
Well, indeed, just as they didn't like the fact that we were skeptical from the outset about the single greatest conspiracy theory. That's Russiagate.
Those are the channels they promote.
Exactly, anyone has ever peddled. So we have been consistently right about Russiagate. And if anybody thinks otherwise, I invite them to go through all the 448 pages of Mueller's report, or to read the 2 ebooks that we're going to be producing on this soon. And as I said, those people who YouTube is promoting were the ones who peddled all the Russiagate conspiracy nonsense. We, as I say, so far from peddling conspiracy theories, we have debunked the biggest and grandest and most ridiculous one of them. And that's perhaps one of the things about us that some people don't like. But there we are.
Yeah, there we are. All right. So share the channel. And you can also help us out by donating to Patreon, to PayPal, and now on Subscribestar as well. So the links for those platforms are in the description box down below. And of course, you can always help us out by picking up mugs at the Duran shop. You can also pick up shirts, t-shirts, polo shirts, long sleeve shirts, hoodies, stickers. Alexander, you're wearing a gray polo with the black double-headed eagle. I'm wearing a white polo with the black double-headed eagle. Alexander, you like the polo? You like the mugs?
Yes, I love the mugs. I have to say something about the polo first. As I said, I mean, it's a sort of nice, beautiful, sunny but slightly cool day in London. Perfect for wearing this kind of polo shirt. It's incredibly comfortable. It reminds me there was a very famous English tennis player who was also famous for wearing polo shirts. And this is the sort of thing that you can easily imagine him wearing. He's an aristocrat. It's very aristocratic. It hangs beautifully. It's made from 100% cotton. It's beautifully dyed. It's extraordinarily comfortable. As I said, I recently wore one to a social event. This one, in fact, to a social event at Ham House, where I was. I went with my dogs, oddly enough, which was probably more controversial than going with the polo shirt. But anyway, not to worry. And as I said, it's an incredibly stylish thing. You can wear it, on a smart casual event, and you can also wear it very comfortably, as I do, at home when I'm working late into the night, reading, tapping away on my computer, filling myself up with all the news and learning about what's going on. So it's a beautiful shirt, and you can help us and yourself by buying one. And of course, you can also buy these absolutely amazing mugs, which, as I said, are beautifully made. It's just a beautiful porcelain body. Very, very, it's got beautiful luster, and this isn't something that comes over on TV, on the films. But if you actually see it or hold it, it's a gloriously good porcelain body. As I said, it reminds me of the imperial porcelain that you get from Russia, and in fact, this one, as you can see, has the Russian, the Moscow double-headed eagle. But this is our double-headed eagle, the one of the Duran, and it points to the east and the west. You can see it also on my embroidery on my polo shirt. And that's because we look at both east and west, and we cover all the news from all over the world, which I think not every channel does to the extent that we do. And I've got a small amount of tea left because I drink lots of tea from this mug. And just to show people the kind of tea I drink, I have a big tea collection. This is from Fortnum and Mason's. It's called Rose Pouchong. It's a very famous Chinese garden tea. It's very refreshing and light, and it's got a wonderful rose flavor because it's got rose petals in it. And it's the perfect tea to drink from a mug like this. And of course, other famous people who drink tea from mugs. Well, one of them is Mr. Putin, the president of Russia, who made a big show recently. There was a big issue about him drinking tea from a mug at the G20 summit. And I think, Alex, we have a similar mug, a very almost
we have one on the shop right now. It has the exact symbol, the double-headed eagle. Once again, the double-headed eagle in gold on a white, I believe Putin had the ceramic thermos. We have that double-headed eagle on a white porcelain mug. So get that mug, brand new. It looks really, really good, really cool, and it's it's what Putin drinks. So all the more reason to buy it.
So you see, all the clever people, myself, Putin, all those people like that, we all drink tea. Winston Churchill also used to drink tea. Margaret Thatcher was a massive tea drinker, as I remember. So there you go. Clever people drink tea. And if you're a socialist, Tony Benn used to drink lots of tea also, as I remember. So tea is what clever people drink. But also very, very clever people like Ronald Reagan and FDR and all those. They drank coffee too, and you can drink coffee from these. And my wife drinks hot chocolate. So there we go.
Okay, so check out that Putin mug as well with the gold eagle. That is in our Duran shop store right now. Order it while supplies last. Alexander, very, very quickly, what do you make of the Russian subs? The Russian sub. That had 14 people that died, and I believe Pence was called away from, I think it was a rally or a meeting to go to the White House. I mean, they've had announcements now that said there's nothing to be alarmed about. But what do you make of what happened there?
Well, that is very interesting because, of course, this is obviously a top secret sub doing some rather secret activity. We don't know what it was. And there was a fire apparently inside the sub, which caused 14 people to die. I'm going to make a guess, by the way, that this submarine might be nuclear powered. I mean, it's talked about as being a submersible, but the Russians have built submersibles. These are not, sort of fleet powered submarines that, go around shooting torpedoes or engage in warfare. But this looks like it was a very deep sea submersible. The Russians have been known to build nuclear powered submersibles that go very, very deep under the water. It may have been involved in some kind of secret, maybe intelligence gathering activity. We don't quite know. And I suspect that we won't know very much. The one thing that points to my mind of this being an unusual episode is not just that Pence was recalled to the White House, which is interesting in itself, but that the commander-in-chief of the Russian Navy is himself taking charge of the investigation. So that's a very senior man indeed. It suggests to me, as I said, some form of covert activity was involved, covert activity. But if that's right, we will probably never know the details.
Okay. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Thank you very much. Until next time, everybody, take care.